Cameras are going to be turned off and muted.
Not initially. I think the.
Or are we keeping them on?
I mean, I'm keeping mine on, and then I know once I share, it turns off everything.
All right, cool. Okay, so we are live. When you guys are ready, we'll start.
I'm ready. Nick, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Houston React Developers Meetup. My name is Tracy. I will be the facilitator for the event. Tonight's commentator will be Nick. He will be managing all of the questions and comments that come in through the chat. Tonight's topic is presented by Fabian, MirageJS, how to spin up a mock API in minutes. Before we get started, we do have a couple of announcements for those of you that are watching. The Houston React Developers Group, we have a short survey. Nick, go ahead and drop in that survey link into the chat. The survey is asking what topics members are interested in attending for future meetups. It's a quick one-question survey. Please help us out by filling that out and hitting the submit button. Second, we are also looking for presenters. So if there is a React topic that one of you would like to present on, please reach out to us. Nick, if you can go ahead and share that email address where people can contact us. Thanks. And then, yes, please hit us up and we will definitely talk with you on presenting for the group. So before we get started, just one more reminder to everyone, please submit all your questions in the chat. And at the end of the presentation, we'll go back over to Nick, our commentator, and he will jump into firing off the chat questions to give Fabian the floor to respond. So Fabian, go ahead. We're going to put ourselves on mute and you can take it away.
Awesome. Can y'all hear me? Just make sure we're all checked. Okay, good. With any video, any recorded video chat, you always got to start off if they can hear you, right? And then followed by that question is the infamous, can you see my screen?
Yes, you're good.
Perfect. Awesome. Cool. So thank you everyone for attending our first virtual React meetup. My name is Fabian. Today I'm going to be talking about MirageJS, how to spin up an API in minutes. Now I promise you I'm going to try my best to make it worth your while, so stick around and I promise you're going to learn something. Okay, so let's go and let's knock out the introduction part of this presentation. So again, my name is Fabian, or Fabian Buentello. Here's my Twitter handle in case you want to reach out. I am a senior front-end engineer at Dragos. So Dragos is an industrial cybersecurity company focused on protecting critical infrastructure. So these are your electrical grids, your water plants, the things that you really don't want to be compromised by an adversary. So if you're interested or want to know more about Dragos, please hit me up. But more importantly, Dragos actually has a spot open for a senior front-end engineer. So if you're curious to know about that or want to know more about Dragos' front-end stack, reach out. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation. And lastly, I am also one of the organizers here at the Houston React Developers Meetup. So as Tracy mentioned at the beginning, we're looking for speakers. Don't worry if you're nervous or you don't know what to talk about. We're here to help, whether that's getting you a topic you feel comfortable presenting over or even help coach you on giving presentations. So if you're interested in that, please fill out that form that is in that live chat or reach out to us. So why? Why did I want to give a presentation over Mirage? Why did I feel it's a tool that people should learn about? Well, I guess let's start off with a basic application. An application, we have a UI layer, we have a data layer, we have a service layer. So let's kind of talk about how these things usually flow. So from the UI layer, you communicate down to your service layer to fetch some data from an API somewhere, right? So the API responds back with that data and it somehow finds its way into your data layer. Now, when I say data layer, think Redux, MobX, or even your component state. That's all considered data layer, right? So from there, finds its way back up to the UI. But what happens if that API doesn't exist? Or maybe just that one endpoint that you're trying to reach hasn't been made yet. Maybe the backend team is still working on it. Maybe you're a full stack developer and haven't written the backend just yet. So what do? You can mock out the data in your UI layer. So what I mean by that is you can hard code an array of objects in your component, and you can present that to the user. Okay. You can mock it out in your data layer. Think Redux. Think when you set the initial state, you can put your dummy data there. All right. So, I mean, you can do this many different ways. There's no one right way. But the way I look at it, regardless, you're going to have to write data fetching code. You're going to have to write some service layer code. You're going to have to you're going to have to write code to handle errors. So what can we do to solve this? This is where Mirage comes in. Mirage lets you build, test, and share complete front-end applications without having to rely on back-end services. So let's just talk a little bit about Mirage. So Mirage was created by Sam Selikoff back in 2015 as an Ember add-on. It's actually built on top of Pretender.js, if you're familiar with that. But it wasn't until 2019 when Mirage was converted to its own standalone library, which allowed React developers, Vue developers, Angular developers, for them to use Mirage in their code base. So this is relatively new for our community. And side note, Mirage has awesome documentation. Now, when I'm a sucker for documentation, when it comes to great examples, good use cases, tells a great story. I was able to read all of Mirage's documentation from front to back because of how much time and effort that they put into those documents. So, okay, back to this slide. So, okay, so in this scenario, our API is reaching out to some endpoint or some service that doesn't exist. So again, I've already kind of told you what you can do, or what we can do, let's use Mirage to solve our problem here. So we're going to bring Mirage into our code base, and what we're going to do is tell Mirage to intercept any API request that fall within this endpoint. So it's intercepting. So as far as our application is concerned, it thinks that it's communicating to the real API, when in fact Mirage is stepping in and responding back as if it were the API. So okay, let's kind of see what we're going to be doing here today. Here is a simple blog post application where I, the author, can create, update, delete posts, and people can leave posts. Now, obviously here I'm using a React, so maybe we're at a React meetup, but this is the end state of where we want to be at. So let's see how to get there. Now, I'm not going to crack open VS Code and explore the code base. Nothing ever good ever happens from that. But I do need to describe to you the application. It's a very simple CRUD-like application where, right here we have here's our app.js, and we have, router switch statement and our different routes in our application. So these are all just the different screens, and on those screens, we fetch API calls or we make them. And to show you that, there's no hand waving behind the curtain magic, here are all the API requests that are made in this application. Now, I know this question is going to happen, so I'll go ahead and beat you to it. This code is available on GitHub. It is available, or you should be able to find it in the video description. So, okay, we don't currently have Mirage in our application. So when we start up our application and it starts making API calls, we get the following, which is expected. I mean, the API doesn't exist just yet. So let's go ahead and let's change that. So coming back to our app.js, let's add Mirage now. So let's create a new file called MirageServer.js. And this is just some like boilerplate code to get us off the ground. We're going to be filling this out in a bit. But yeah, let's go ahead and let's import Mirage in our code base and let's start it. And that's it. Now we can officially start intercepting API requests with Mirage, and our application has no idea about it. So obviously I have our make server call wrapped in an environment variable, and this is only to prevent, this is to prevent Mirage from being bundled in our production build. So okay, now we have Mirage, and we reload the browser, and we still get 404s. Well, that's expected because we haven't actually told Mirage how to intercept these requests. So let's go and let's do just that. So I guess, sorry, before jumping in adding our first route, there's some Mirage configurations that I just wanted to show you before we get too deep into the weeds. So where we're at the high level, I just want to talk about like how expressive Mirage's API is. It's very easy to understand, and reason about. So some of the things that you can do, for example, is you can set the timing on your responses. So when you're in test mode, by the way, your responses have 0 delay response time. So with this, that means that your tests run extremely fast. But in the case that you want to test out, like, I don't know, poor internet connection, you can do that by setting the timing. Or maybe you want to prefix all the APIs you want Mirage to be listening to. You can do just that. And so after you defined all your routes, if an API request doesn't fall within one of the routes that you make, it's just going to pass on through. Now, the pass through, it can also take in a function, so you can do a little bit, some cool things where you can pass in a like let's say a search query param in your API request to tell Mirage to listen, right? But for now, for this demo or for this presentation, we're just going to be using the basic, this.passthrough, which means, hey, if we don't have a route defined for this API request, just let it pass on through. So, okay, let's add our first route. The first thing that we want to do is make a post model. So again, we're making a blog post application here. Now, so we created a model, but it's not something that we need to get started, but it's going to make our lives easier in a bit. Next, we're going to jump into our routes method, and we're going to define our first route handler. Here, we're going to just straight up return JSON when we get a GET request to API/post endpoint. So, okay, cool. Our browser gets reloaded, and this is what we see. Awesome. So, okay, the thing that I really like about Mirage is its logging. If you look at the console at the bottom, you can see exactly what was sent up and what was returned, making it really, really easy to debug what's going on. But again, so like on this screen here in the code, and after the presentation, we can go ahead and, we can crack open the code and you can see all the requests if you like. But whenever this screen loads, it makes an API request to the GET API post endpoint. So that's all that's happening here. So where we are right now, it's 1,000 times better than hard coding your mock data in your UI layer. At least that's how I feel. But obviously, as you can tell, we just have 2 items here. What happens if we want to put 10, 20? Like this one route handler is going to get really, really noisy. So how can we fix that? So Mirage provides a solution using Fixtures. Fixtures gives you a way to initially seed mock data in your Mirage server. And the way you access this data is by using Mirage's database, which is simply an in-memory database that gets reset when the browser refreshes. So don't worry, nothing gets written to disk. But okay, maybe if what I just said was a lot of words, let's just see it in practice here. So what we're going to do is we're going to move our dummy data into its own file in this Fixtures directory. And now what we're going to do is we're going to import this file inside of our Mirage server and set it in our Fixtures property. So now we have this post fixture. So, okay, cool. So now this data is inserted into Mirage's database. So probably the next question that you're going to ask is like, okay, so how do we query this data? So you can query Mirage's database one of 2 ways, via Mirage's schema or reaching down directly into Mirage's database to retrieve that data. Don't worry, I'm going to show you when you should use one over the other, or when I prefer to use one over the other. But for now, just know that there are two ways to get your mock data. So, okay, we want to retrieve multiple posts. How can we do that? So if we go via, we take this schema approach, we can get all of our posts, or we can even pass in a filter and use the where method. And as you can see, where method can also accept a function. So these are all the methods that you can run on your schema object to return multiple posts. And here are the methods that you can use via the database approach. As you can see, that where method only accepts a plain JavaScript object. So that's just one thing to know. This is one thing that kind of confused me when I first started, is when I see documentation and I didn't properly read the documentation and understood the difference between a schema and a database, but they are different. And for the most part, they're very close in how they operate, but there are certain cases where one kind of shines over the other. But I mean, with that, let's go a level deeper on this. So, in the, printing out the methods that you have here, they both seem to have pretty similar methods. Like they both have find by, find or create, right? My recommendation when retrieving data, always use the schema approach. This will become very apparent in a couple of slides when we talk about relationships and serializers. But if you were to crack open one of these objects, this is what you would see. So the first one, we are opening, we're just grabbing the first post model. So since the schema, and this is defined out in the documentation, the scheme, when interfacing with your data via the schema, you would be returned back the model class. So here we're returned back the post model object. So it's more than just your properties. You have a few methods on your model object, and you're going to see those methods here in a bit. Okay, but now in the second screenshot here, this is what happens when you query for an item via the database. You get returned back the raw JSON, which sounds pretty good. And those was some of the early mistakes that I made. But as you'll see later on, sometimes it can kind of, isn't the best approach, or at least the schema approach shines brighter. So, okay. Back in our Mirage server file, we're going to fetch our posts using the schema.all. And so when our browser gets refreshed, this is what we get. So cool. All right. So now we have all our posts that are being seeded or initially set via our fixtures, and we're just inside of our API/post endpoint. We're getting all of them. So, our Mirage server file looks so much cleaner than it would have if we would have posted everything there, obviously. But there's still something that I don't like here. And it's these fixtures. I mean, not only is it hand curated, but anytime the model changes, which is something that happens pretty regularly as a software developer, backend might tell me, oh, hey, I know you're mocking out our endpoint using Mirage. Well, here are all these new properties that you need to add. So I have to go into this fixtures file, add all these properties to each one of these objects. And so it just seems like it can get out of sync pretty quick. And I honestly probably want something a little bit more dynamic. So how can we do that? We do that by using Mirage's factories. With a factory, we tell Mirage how we would like our post model to be generated. And now Mirage's documentation describes a factory as the following. It's more of a recipe or blueprints for creating records off models. So now that if the model changes, I just jump into the factory, update the structure, and by using a library like Faker.js, I can generate some pretty awesome mock data. So, okay, cool. Mirage knows how to generate my post object, but how do I tell it how many to create? This is where the seed method comes in. And so just as these are all kind of these are all, if you ever developed a backend, these are things that these terms are not anything new. So we're going to seed our database with 200 post records. So what I like about this is obviously if you want to create, 10, 5, doesn't matter. It's a quick one-line change. So, okay, cool. We have this route to get all the posts. So, but the user, when we click on one of those post links and we go to the post, detail view, we're met with another 404. And that's because we haven't told Mirage how to handle an API/post/ID endpoint. So how to query a single post, right? So let's see how to query for a record. So if you want to query using the schema, we have 3 methods here. We have the find, where it finds a record with a matching ID. Find by, which returns the first record to match an object, or just return me the first. And if you want to query via the database, here's how you can do that. So back in our code here, let's go ahead and we create a route for our get API post/ID endpoint. And we're going to go ahead and use the schema to fetch or to find that post. And so what we do is we're using the request params or getting the ID from the request parameters to get that identifier. And so whenever our browser reloads, this is what we see. So, okay, cool. 2 out of the 5 routes that we need to make, we're making headway here. But okay, now the user, they want to click that edit button on the top right. They're brought to this screen. I don't think it's any secret that since we don't have a real API, when we hit that submit button, it's going to blow up. So let's go ahead and let's add that route here now. So let's talk about how to update a record. So if you want to update a record via the schema, here's how to do that. First, we'll find the post that matches the ID request parameter. And then what we'll do is we'll make a change to that post. But now here's the thing that you need to remember. So when you query for a post through the schema, and right there where you see line or you see updated post, and that's a post model. You can change it however you want, and that's you have complete control over it. But if you want that change or those changes to persist, you have to say you have to save it. So then that's that line updated post.save. If we didn't do that, the next time it refetches the data, those changes would not be returned with that post. And now here's all the different ways that you can update a record via the database approach. Now the first one, it's saying, hey, update all of my posts, set title to updated title. And then the second one here, we're just finding a post with where the ID equals 1. And then you can also pass in an object to say, update any post where title equals foobar. And again, or because we were updating via the database, all these changes would persist in future API requests. So okay, let's go ahead and let's add this route. So let's add a patch route for the API post/ID endpoint. And when I'm making these changes, for me, when I'm making changes to the database, I personally would like to work with the database object instead of the schema, just because it makes things, it's a little bit cleaner, or it's cleaner. And I don't have to worry about the whole save, stuff. But here's a demo of that working. And see, we get a post, we're updating the title, we're going to be updating the content. And there you go. Now we see that title was, or that post was updated. So, okay, so now let's handle when the user tries to create a post. So that's that button on the top right. So here's how you can create a record. Here's how you do it via the schema. So again, you can't forget to hit, to save it, or else it's just a model that you created in a function. And here's how you can do it via the database. So you're just going to be inserting it into the database, which again, it will persist. So jumping back into our routes method, so we have a new endpoint, a new post endpoint for API/post there at the bottom. And since I'm adding a record, I'm going to go ahead and just insert it directly into the database. And here's a demo of that happening. You're just going to refetch it, and then there's that new post that we just made. So we're moving along pretty quick. So here, let's talk about how to delete a record. So here's how you do it via the schema. Now here's one thing that is different. When you destroy, or when you delete via the schema, which is the destroy method, it does actually persist in the database. So no need to save it. And here's how you can delete a record via interacting with the database. So same thing, let's go ahead and let's add that delete route at the bottom for the API post/ID. And let's go ahead and let's remove that record directly from the database. And here's that. It's okay, cool. So we just finished building a CRUD-like API for one of our models. And this is really cool, but it can really only get you so far. Chances are you're probably going to be dealing with data that has relationships with other models. So let's see how you can do just that. Starting where we last left off, so we have a post. We have our post, which has a model and a factory. And here on the right is the response that we get. Now, again, we need to bring in the relationships here. So what we want to do is we want to add a second model comment. And we're also going to be adding this serializer property, but don't worry about it for now. We're going to come back to it. But like we now want to start building an association between our models. So Mirage allows us to do that using the association helpers. And so what those association helpers are is the has, many, and belongs to. So in our model, model definition here, what we're telling Mirage is, so we have a post model and it has many comments, and our comment model should only belong to one post. So now these association helpers do more than just connect two models in this Mirage server. It does add some dynamic methods to our model objects, which you'll see in a bit. But okay, if we go over to the right now, just by making these models aware of each other, our post JSON object now has the comments array. So okay, cool. So now we know that our post object, it knows it has comments. Let's go and let's see how we can take it one step further. Well, I guess before going in and trying to like embed some data here, we have these two models, but if you remember back in our factories, we're only creating the post. We still need to create a comment. So, all right, long story short, let's jump back into our factories and let's connect a few loose wires between our models. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a comments factory. And in here, it will have two properties, the text and created at. Now, if you look down at our seeds, we're still only creating two posts. Like we need to also create some comments and build that association. So how do we do that? We do that using the after create hook on the post factory. Now, what after create is after the post has been created, let's run this code here. That's all it is. So let's go ahead and let's do just that. So after a post is created, let's create 3 comments and let's set the post ID to the created post ID. Or sorry, let's create 3 comments and let's set post ID to post.id. So now when we look at our responses, or to our response, our post object now has our comment IDs. Now, I don't know about you, when I first saw this, I got really excited. I was like, okay, this is freaking cool. But you see this line right here? There are many different ways we could have achieved the same thing. But don't worry, like Mirage has all this documented. So just run over to the documentation, you'll be able to see all the different ways. But here's a few. So we could have created a list of 3 comments and just tossed in the actual post. We could have said post.commentIDs equals, this array of numbers. Or we could have said post.comments equals comments. Like, so these are all things that were added, or all these abilities were added because of those association helpers that we did in the model definition. And regardless, whichever one you would have done, Mirage would have built all these associations the same. So, okay, we have a post, and our posts have, the comments have an array of comment IDs, but as developers, sometimes we need more than just foreign keys. Sometimes we need, related models to be embedded in responses. And so we need Mirage to be a little bit smarter on that. So the way that we do that is by tweaking our serializer configuration. So we're going to update it. We're going to tweak the configuration to include and embed the comments model with our post serializer. So if we look back at our JSON response, as you see, now we have our complete comments object inside of our post object. So, I mean, this is just JSON. Let's see this thing in action now. So if we swing back over to our application, here we have 2 posts, each with 3 comments. And here you can see the comments in the detail view. So, okay, the last missing piece of functionality for our application for this demo is the ability to add comments to a post. So let's jump into our routes method and let's add that handler. So we create a post handler for the API/post/ID/comments. And so the first thing we do is we parse out the request body so we can add a created at property. Next, we find that post using the request parameters. And then lastly, we have this post.createComment method. Now, y'all didn't see me write this method, right? Well, that's because this method was added dynamically from the association helpers that we used earlier. So this is it's these type of things that I really like about Mirage, that they take it one step further to improve that developer experience. So in the demo that you saw here on the right, because I know I was talking, I'll go ahead and I'll play it again. But here, we're just clicking on a post, and we're just going to go ahead and leave a quick comment. Right now, this post only has 3 comments. We're going to save it, and then when we jump back, you'll see that that post was updated to now having 4 comments. So we're almost to the end. Hang on there. Hang on. But there's 2 more things that I wanted to go over. Honestly, I barely scratched the surface on what Mirage can do. I didn't even talk about factory traits. I didn't talk about the different serializers that you can do. So, for example, like the JSON API serializer, active record serializer. But the one thing I did want to show you is I took the long way on some of the things that I did. Now, the reason why I took the long way is because I wanted to show you how configurable Mirage can be. But let me just go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. So you see this route method that we have. You see all these routes that we had to define. All this could have been, what we could have done instead is this .resource post. Now, obviously that requires a lot of buy-in on the conventions that Mirage uses, but also know this, that these conventions that Mirage uses these are already established conventions. So there's not anything new here. It obviously depends on your real API and how close it resembles the Mirage response. But again, I'm bringing this up to show you how fast you can spin up a mock API so you can start on your front-end development. And the second thing, I know what you're probably thinking. You're probably thinking, so Fabian, all this work that I just did pretty much gets thrown away once my real API is finished, right? Wrong. Because of the little upfront work that you did, writing solid tests is actually going to be pretty fast for you. So I'm sorry, spinning up some tests for your application is going to be super quick. So what I mean, so right here on the right is an example of what a Cypress test could look like for this application. So here we have a before each where we create a Mirage server under the test environment, which again makes our responses have 0 delay. We have an after each, which shuts down our server. And with these tests, our first test here, we're creating 10 posts and we're verifying that these 10 posts are being returned or being displayed in the UI. And in the second post, or excuse me, in the second test here, we're creating a post through the server or through Mirage's server, and we're verifying that that post is what gets displayed when visited through the UI. And so because because both these tests are powered via the API, your test can test out all layers of your application. And especially since these requests can be handcrafted, you can easily test for errors, like edge cases. What happens if you get returned? What happens if API returns a 500 or this property is null or undefined? So you have a lot of control in that regard. But yeah, so with that, so here are the references used to create this presentation. If you're interested in learning more about Mirage, Sam has a really, really good video that walks through it. This is that video here. So it's domain modeling for JavaScript apps with MirageJS. I mean, you see that it's long, but I'm telling you, it goes by so fast because all the things that Mirage can do, which I honestly barely skimmed the surface, he goes over. But yeah, thank you so much for attending my talk. I guess, does anyone have any questions? I know that I did want to actually show the application, but I guess before doing that, I'll hand it back over to you, Tracy.
All right. Thank you, Fabian. That was an awesome presentation. And you are right. We are going to go ahead and move over to the chat to see what questions have popped in. So Nick, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you could go ahead and read off any of the chat questions so that Fabian has a chance to respond.
Yes. So for anyone that's in the chat right now for YouTube, if you have any questions, definitely go ahead and start posting them in now. Currently right now we don't have any, but I'll go ahead and ask them just in case if anybody's out there just wondering. But go ahead if you're in the chat. May have any questions for Fabian, you could go ahead and post them in now. But Fabian, let me go ahead and start off with one of them. Can I use Mirage with GraphQL?
Yes. So I didn't, obviously I didn't have it in my presentation, but so if you're not familiar with GraphQL, it's, I don't want to call it a competitor to REST, but it's a way that you can yes. So short answer, yes, but with GraphQL, you send up a GraphQL request, and that data in this request you define out what properties you want returned, and it returns just that. But long-winded answer to say yes, MirageJS can handle a GraphQL.
All right, we got another one here. Do I have to set up Mirage in my app.js file, or can it be in anywhere in the file?
Oh, so no, this is actually one of the things that I love about Mirage. So if I am working on, it does not have to be, you don't have to define out or call Mirage in your root, root app file. If you can call it any file that you want. So what I've done in my own, at work when using Mirage is if I'm working on this one screen and I just need, it's like, okay, this one screen's making, 10 requests, but this one request that it makes, I need to, intercept it and return some dummy JSON data. Then I'll just do it in that one file. So you don't go, again, another long-winded answer to saying no, it doesn't have to be in app.js all the time.
And we got one question from Daniel. Are there any boilerplate generators?
That is a really good question, and I've been like, no, not that I know of. As far as my experience, I haven't seen one, but at the same time, I haven't put in as much effort on that front. But I can totally see that being something that would solve a lot of pain points. So one of those pain points being that example where backend makes a change to the model, and instead of you having to go in and update your factories and maybe reconnect a few things, it'd be really nice to have all that code be generated.
And then I guess the last question of the day looks like chat is good with questions right now. So I guess last question would be, will these slides be available after the presentation?
Yes. So we do have. I did update the description in the video to include a link. If it doesn't, then please reach out and I'll get those to you. But they should be in the description of the video.
All right, awesome. Well, let me go ahead and pass this back to Tracy.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess I'll stop sharing if I can find my, where is the window for it? Ah, oh, there you are. So
Hey, Fabian. Yeah, Fabian, you got muted, but go ahead.
I am muted. There you go. So Tracy, I will want to hand it back to you. So would you want me to kind of demo the application? I know I didn't have it open during the presentation, but crack it open and see how it operates.
Yeah, I don't see why not if we wanted to take a few minutes to look at that.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and let me share my screen here. So here's the application. It is available on GitHub. I put it in the description of the video. Let's open up the console over here on the right. And so again, this is where Mirage, you can see all those requests get made. So let's reload the browser here just so you can see it. And so we do, like, when this page gets loaded, we send out a Mirage request, request to load our posts. And so here they are. And so what we're going to do is, let's go ahead and collapse this. I'm going to hit this delete here. As you see, we delete posts with ID 1. And so I'm using a React query behind the scenes instead of Redux. Now, I don't want to get into React query and how it operates, but I just invalidate some cache data that it has. So the way I have my React query set up is whenever this delete request gets made, I want it to invalidate this request. So therefore, it causes my application to refetch the post. So we hit the delete. Well, I mean, the delete doesn't return anything because you just pass an ID with the delete. But if you want, let's go and let's update one of these guys. So let's just edit here. Some title and content would do this. Let's clear out this console. So here it is right here. So the patch. So what we sent up was title, some title, and the respond back was the updated post from the database. But because of the way I have React query set up, whenever this when this endpoint gets called, like a patch API post /ID, I invalidate the get post, and so it refetched all of them. So if we look at the post here, we see it updated. Now, I mean, I can go ahead and crack open the code, but I just want to show this application is very much real. It's not anything. There's no magic. And now this entire API, all these requests that you see get made, it's all powered from Mirage. So if you don't trust me, let's. Here's my code here. Oop. And here's our Mirage server. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna comment that out and save it. It's gonna cause our browser to reload here, or maybe not. As we refresh it, and there you go. Like all that entire interaction was powered. The entire backend was powered using Mirage. So no real API was actually created. And so we could try to create one here. Nothing. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I'll go ahead and I'll swing it back over to you, Tracy.
Okay, thanks again, Fabian, for presenting tonight. Thanks again, audience, for attending as well. Please don't forget to fill out the survey for us on the Meetup topics. And if any of you are interested in presenting, please reach out to us via email address. Nick, if you don't mind, drop in the survey link and the email address one more time in the chat for everybody. But other than that, keep an eye out for the next Meetup date, and we will all see you next time. Thank you.